Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming back to another episode of Declan's Autism Journey podcast. I have a super special guest today, my favorite sister, Cathy. My only sister, by the way, but also my favorite. She's joining me today, which I'm so excited about, but we're really going to talk about signs that she probably saw in Declan. I prepped her for this to be ready, but signs that she probably saw in Declan before Tim or I were either recognizing them or living in our denial time. Cathy, a little bit of background, is a mom of three. So she's very well versed in the children arena. She's also a teacher. She's a reading specialist. So works with children on the spectrum at times. So certainly had much more exposure to, see the signs and recognize them than Tim and I had. Hi, Kath.
Hi, Di. So good to see you.
Doing this. So Cathy and I live in different states, so we actually don't ever get together very often. So It's exciting that we're doing this together.
It is. Thank you for asking me to do this. I'm very honored and very excited.
You're my first guest, and after Tim was like, "No, I'm not doing it," you were my next in line.
I won't take offense to that. Thanks, Tim, for stepping aside. I appreciate it.
Yep. Maybe one day he'll come on here, but not now.
Maybe.
All right. So let's talk about when you first started seeing signs in Declan. How old was he? What were those signs? What was I doing at the moment? Like, just besides living in denial, what did that look like from your perspective?
Sure. Well, like you said, even though you guys were living here when Declan was born, I think we came to visit you after you soon moved to South Carolina. And it was obviously me and Tim. My husband is also named Tim. Me and Tim, my Tim, and our two boys at the time. My daughter was not born yet. And we came to visit with you guys and hang out. And Declan had to be, I want to say maybe like the summer before he turned 2.
Yeah, it was. Yep.
Yeah, because I know he was in diapers and it was really hot and he was running around his little diaper and his little cute hair, just bouncing all around. And I was envious of all his lovely curls. And I remember snacks being like his number one thing. And I remember how he would just be like beeline for you when you had like the goldfish or whatever it was. And I remember being out in your family room with him. And again, there was all the other boys were so little at the time. So it was just like chaos and noise and craziness. And when my older boys get together with your older boy, it's a lot going on. So I remember having like a quiet moment with Declan and we were out in your living room and he was in his little diaper and it was hot and he was just like, he walked over to this little, like a lion toy that had like a mane that he clearly loved. And he sat down kind of just like by himself and started playing with the mane and just kind of rocking a little bit. And that was maybe my first thought where I kind of went, oh, because I was like, Declan, I'm like, do you want to have a snack? Or Declan, like I tried to get his attention since it was just him and I and just trying a little auntie nephew bonding time. And he was not paying any attention to me. He was just very happily, quietly, calmly sitting and just playing. And it wasn't anything major. He was just sitting there quietly and clearly soothing himself with the sensory piece of like the mane. And that was just kind of maybe my first, I don't even know where that was in the trip, whether it was like our first day there or like our last day there. I don't remember any of that. But that was just the one thing that kind of just set a little red flag off to me. But at the same time, I was like, it's crazy loud in here. These older boys are going nuts. If I was, 20 months old, I might want to go, like, look, I was in there with him because it was quieter.
Right.
So looking back, I feel like that I can say now was probably a moment that I first noticed something was a little different. I didn't at the time think that. I think I just was like, oh my God, he loves that little toy. Like, what a cute lion. Like, I wasn't thinking, oh my gosh, he's autistic. Like, I wasn't thinking that at all at the time. I was just thinking, okay, that's interesting. Well, all kids are different. And just kind of then, I don't know, probably 3 kids burst in the room and we moved on to
moved on. Yeah.
But that was probably the first moment. And I think, that like, I can't remember any other instances from that trip specifically. Yeah. That was just the one that stuck out to me. And then, like I said, in hindsight, I feel like that's a much more obvious thing to notice. I mean, like you said, I'm a teacher. I work in a public school, and I've been a reading specialist and a reading teacher for almost 20 years. I taught first grade. I've worked with kids on the spectrum before, mostly kids who are dyslexic, but a lot of similarities. And I've seen other kids in my school, obviously, who have, are on the spectrum and are have behavior specialists or have ABA therapy, or all kinds of different speech pathology, everything. So PT. So I've been exposed to a lot of it, even if I haven't been directly teaching a lot of the kids who are on the spectrum.
Right. I think seeing those signs and recognizing them is so important. And I mean, clearly, again, like that wouldn't have even been a trigger for me. Like not responding to his name. I don't know. I think it was also like COVID was happening. So it was just like,
yeah.
You're just kind of like, well, this is whatever. It is what it is. We're just, we're not really knowing what to do with this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and like I said, it's not something I even thought about in the moment, like, oh, I have a checklist out and I'm checking things down.
Right.
Nephew here, can he respond to my commands? Oh, my nephew seems to have some sensory concerns. Like, I definitely wasn't thinking that at the time. I was just like, oh, he loves that cute little lion and what a cute little face on him. And he's just like, I did notice that he didn't connect with me at all. And I was kind of like, but he doesn't know me hardly. You guys had moved when he was so little. So,
right.
And again, we came in like a hurricane, the 4 of us probably, into his quasi quiet lifestyle at that time. Brenda wasn't too crazy at that time. So yeah. So, and then I will say, we drove to South Carolina from Boston. So when we were driving home, and obviously my husband, who's a school principal, he's been a principal now for 10 years, but also was an middle school and high school teacher. So different exposure. But we were driving home in the car, and I know the boys were plugged in with their headphones on, and we were just chatting in the front. And I don't know, I said something like, oh, like how cute was Declan with that little lion toy or something like that. And he's like, yeah, he's like, did he like respond to you at all? Like, I talked to him, like I tried to connect with him a little bit, and he like kind of didn't want anything to do with me. And I was like, yeah, like, so we started just chatting about our interactions with Declan over like the couple days we were at your house. And we both noticed like some of the same things about like the rocking, just how quiet he was, and kind of going off into like self-soothe and like these different little things that were just a little not typical, that age level, but we both still at the time, I mean, even then we're like, well, he's so young, like, let's just, but yeah.
So that's what we've talked about is like, you are both educators and you could still both say, well, maybe he's still so young, like, right? Because he's part of the family. It's so hard to accept. It's so hard to face it. And I think that's what I want other parents to recognize. Like, I think back now, it's like, oh, if I could just do things differently, I would. It's like,
but you can't do that. No, I mean, you did everything right. I mean, you've given him everything he's needed. He's a wonderful, well-rounded little boy. I mean, you're giving him everything. And from day one, you gave him everything that he needed to become the little guy that he is right now. He's only 5, so, yeah, I mean, you didn't, if anything, you guys are beyond supportive and open to what his needs are. I think, I mean, again, I'm not an expert. I'm not a doctor. I'm not, I've worked with a few kids before, like in general, a few
Right.
hundred kids, I don't know. But yeah, but it is true with him being family, like it's funny to look back on it. And now I see like, oh, those seem like very glaring signs to me now.
Right.
But at the time, and even having that conversation with Tim in the car, it was like a short conversation. And then we talked about something else, where we're going to stop for lunch. Like, so even in that moment, even with now, like I had my own moment with Declan where I kind of was like, oh, that's interesting. And then now fast forward to us in the car driving home, and we have a conversation, but we're just like, interesting. And then we just kept going. But like, it was never like, well, we need to talk to Diane and Tim. Like it just never, like I never even saw it as that. I don't know if it's because I'm his aunt or, because we're so close. And I don't know. It's just so interesting, even given our experiences and our background like that. I mean, I don't know. And that seems very unnatural, just to be like, oh, your child is autistic. Like,
Right. It's a hard thing to get to. It's a hard place to get to.
Yeah.
And that's like one of the reasons for this podcast is I want other parents to know that are just starting out, like that's where we were. Like this is truly where we were. And while we did live in denial for a little bit and lack of acceptance, like, and that is still hard for me 3.5 years later to acknowledge that I did that. It's still hard, and I wish I could do it again, but I can't.
I don't know if it was so much denial as you didn't know what you didn't know. Like that wasn't an area you were familiar with, So I think you're beating yourself up a bit for that, because I mean, it's not like now where he is, he's 5. It's not like you're still sitting here going, nope, those aren't his issues. He's just, slow to develop or, we're like, you're fully on board and with what his needs are and how to, help him and getting him the help he needs. So
yeah. And you have to get there on your own time.
Yeah.
I just, next other interactions that you saw with him, once I said to you, like, okay, he's on the spectrum, like I have to admit this, I have to face it.
Mm-hmm.
From your perspective as my next closest support person, what do you think are some tips that you would give to others as either the parents to parents that are navigating? Like, what is your role as a support person?
I think it's a tough line to walk, but I think you have to be first and foremost respectful of where you're coming from and where you are in this journey. If I identified that, say, and said, okay, yes, I think my nephew might be autistic, and you weren't there yet, I think I have to respect that I can't push that on you. That's not something I can make you figure out. Like if I had called you and said, like, Diane, we need to talk. Declan's autistic. You need to just wake up and get with the program. Like that would not have gone very well.
No, even if I needed it, it still wouldn't have been received very well.
Right. And that's a pretty harsh way to speak to anyone about any issue.
Yeah.
It's your son. So you already have that very protective side to you about him, or any of your children, any of your sons, regardless of whether they're atypical or not. And I think, obviously having that relationship that we have and, being able to, bring my background in with it, I think it was more waiting, like when you would say something, then I'd kind of be like, all right, well, let's talk about that. Let's explore that. Or let's, like, tell me what you're thinking. Tell me what you feel. Like, just kind of be there to be the sounding board. Like, and I say this to my husband often, like if I come in to like vent or have an issue, I'm not necessarily looking for a solution. I just want to be that. I just want to be heard, so I feel like in the beginning stages, that's definitely a big part is you're trying to figure it out. How I support you by listening to you, by, doing my own research. You would send me clips of things and I would look into it and like be like, oh, this seems pretty legit, or I don't know about this, let me find out some more information. Or I'd ask some of the amazing teachers that I work with and say, hey, have you heard of this before? And then kind of give you my feedback on stuff. So that was kind of, but to me it had to be something that you had to come to terms with in your own time on what works for your family. And I just support that, whatever it is, it's not my decisions to make, but
Yeah.
my decisions are that I will just, whatever you guys need for support with Declan, with Brendan, with Cooper, is what we're here for, regardless of the, Deck being on the spectrum. It's,
Right.
he's my nephew, just like Brendan and just like Coop. So, we're here to support all of them. And as so I'm a sounding board. I'm, someone who will hopefully like learn some of this stuff as Deck gets older. And, you had originally talked a while ago about maybe he'd learn sign language. Well, I'm like, okay, kids, I'm like, rally up. We're all going to figure out basic sign language so we can communicate with Declan, like whatever it might be,
Right.
I bought Disconnected Kids by Robert, Dr. Malello. And I've looked into some parts of, I haven't read the whole thing yet. Sorry, Dr. Malello, but I'll get there. I'm reading it in sections based on the parts that I want to read first. So,
Right.
Mom life. Yeah. So that's kind of what I think. It's more just supporting what you guys decide to do with him, and whatever knowledge I can give you based on my own experience, my own education, and, my
Right.
graduate work and whatnot. Like, I want to do what I can. It's, if you were in Massachusetts or if I was in South Carolina and I knew more about the schools and stuff like that, I'd probably, be able to support you more on the more direct level. But, I feel like right now it's more just, you'll call and we'll chat and I'm like, all right, tell me about, how did therapy go today? Or, oh, I know you were up in New York. Like, tell me about that today. Like, how was the sessions, yeah. So that's kind of where I think.
I think it's been so helpful. I would say to other people, my husband is amazing. He's wonderful, but we are both so closely tied emotionally to Declan, obviously, as his parents. Not that you're not, but you are one level removed. And
Yeah.
that, even just that is really helpful because, I'm sometimes so emotional about the decisions I'm making for him. It is overwhelming to feel like you have to make these clinical decisions for him and you have to find these things yourself, that are outside the norm, and then to vet them and then to feel like you're making a clear decision, because I think I've talked a lot about operating in fear and making decisions based in the fear bubble.
Mhm.
And I think we are at a point now where we're less doing that less often, and we're trying to really make smart choices, educated choices, as educated as we can be since we're not physicians. But, I think so. I would encourage everyone else that is starting out on this path to find a support person that they can share everything with, but is not as closely tied to their child as they are, because, you also though have to be open to feedback.
Yeah.
While I drive his bus and I will always stand by the fact that I know what is best for Declan, the best thing that I can do is surround myself with others that I value and respect their opinion, that, aren't afraid to give me their opinion.
Yeah.
I talked in a prior podcast, I don't think that's been published yet, but that our music therapist, Riley, she's amazing. And
Yes.
she said to me one day, I think Declan might do better without you in the room. And because I wanted to participate and I wanted to be there and I wanted to be holding his hand and I wanted to be singing. And that had to be really hard for her to say that to me, but I love that she did. And I was like, I hear you. I respect your opinion. You are amazing. I'm out. I'm leaving.
Because I think you can recognize that you have that connection with her and she wants what's best for Declan too. So like you said, when you drive that bus, like you're driving to destination Declan town, and like we're all on it and we're all here to support him. And yeah, it's just, being supportive, being a sounding board. I think from an extended family member who you trust, if other people out there listening and they're in this situation, their niece, their nephew, their cousin's child, or whoever it is that they're exposed to, I think if they think they can provide support and be someone, because this is a long road, and they need to stick their necks out there and say, hey, I want to be someone that you can count on. I mean, we have lots of friends whose kids have type 1 diabetes, and that's a lifelong issue. But we want to be people that are like, hey, what do we need to know so we can help support you to help keep his little friendships and life just cruising along the way a typical kid's would, so similar, like how can we best support you to, you know, make Declan, I think there was one other time it's popping to my mind now. We were in Florida, at my house in Florida, and we were out at Sunset Walk, and you were probably busy with Cooper because he was super tiny, and everyone's running around, like all 6 of these kids. And Declan was sitting in the stroller, and you were like, can you just like squeeze his calves? Like he really that. And I was like, got it. Because in the moment I'm thinking he was starting to get a little upset and he was stimming. And I honestly didn't know what to do. And I was calm about it, but I was just kind of sitting there going, I wish I could help him right now. We're just like, I didn't even say anything. And you were like, if you just squeeze his calves, like that will help him calm down. And I did that, and he calmed down like almost immediately. And I felt great that I was able to help him and like to soothe him. And so it's just communication and, being okay that you don't know everything and you don't know how to fix everything. And that's okay too. And, you could just tell me to do that and I could do that. And it felt like a great moment because it calmed him down. He seemed happy, and you could take care of Cooper and feed him the bottle, and I could be useful in that scenario, so it takes a village, like they say.
Takes a village. And I think too, like just asking, or like I knew I could just say, you're my sister. I was just like, hey, squeeze his calves, give him some
yeah.
And like, you did it. But I think for other support people, I think just asking, how can I support? How would I meet Declan's needs? What does he need? What does he like? And even some of those questions are so hard because you just, even as mom, I sometimes don't know in the moment. In that moment, I knew he needed some deep pressure. He was getting overwhelmed by all of the people and the loud noises. But I don't always know what he needs. So it's more just like trying, but it's like, to your point, it's that open communication, and it's talking about, okay, what does he need? How can I help? Or if we're going to be in a certain situation, would Declan be comfortable? I think the worst thing people can do is not ask those questions and then just exclude, whether intentional or unintentional. It's ask the questions, because more than anything, I want him included in everything. And I will be the one to make the decision if the situation isn't right for him. That's my call.
And that comes down to communication, I think, if you're just saying, hey, even if you're just like, I don't even know how to start this conversation because I don't know anything about it, but I want to help, or I want to be involved. How can I best be a support to you? Or how can I best, because, you want to be like, I want to be in Declan's life. So I want to know how to communicate with him. I want to know how to make connections with him because I know I still can. So to me, that's important. And the other big thing is, I think you gotta leave judgment at the bus stop. Like you can't sticking with your whole bus theme. Like if you're getting on the bus, leave the judgment at the bus stop, because that's not helpful. Like if you were like, well, we're not going to go there, or we're at a restaurant and he's getting upset because it's getting too loud. Like you just got to be willing to go with whatever, be flexible, non-judgmental, and just do what is best for him. And if everyone focuses on just him, and that's the goal, and we all have the same shared goal, like it's going to work.
Yeah. And it is hard when he's flapping and you're out in public. I mean, I can't even count the number of ignorant, stupid comments I've received. And I probably can't count the number of times I've responded in not my best way.
But you see the podcast of like the top 10 things not to say.
Okay, maybe I'll do that as my next one, because I could probably fill it, which is sad. It's really, really sad. But I also think that plays into the emotional stability of like where the parent is too. Like, I feel like when we go out in public with him, like I'm already on guard. Like I'm already like, okay, what moron is going to say some stupid comment, but then the flip side of it is, then when you encounter really kind people, or maybe even parents that recognize what you're going through, and they're so kind, it's like I start crying because I was so ready for someone to say something so hurtful that when someone says something so kind, you're just like, oh wow, thanks. Like, and then and then you're like, okay, now I look like a crazy special needs parent.
Emotional lady.
So I mean, it's like to be surrounded and go out with people that get Declan, and your husband is great too. Like he's familiar with children on the spectrum, and that they flap and they may stim, and so no one when we go out at our table is bothered by it. Like, obviously my kids are well aware, well versed in this. Your kids are as well. I mean, they're fantastic. They treat Declan just like he is their neurotypical cousin, which is exactly what I want them to do.
Yeah.
Or would Declan like this? And people, they think about him in a special way, like, or the last me, which I just think is so telling that they're all about inclusivity. And there's no better gift as his mom than to know that he is loved and surrounded by those feelings.
Yeah.
It's just so hard when you feel like you're isolated. I talked a lot about that in the beginning episodes. It's like the isolation just is so overwhelming. So it's, now being where I am, it's like you realize you can't be isolated. First of all, it's not healthy for anybody, but also that's not reality. Like bring in people onto your bus that accept your child.
There's enough seats on that school bus. Yeah.
There's a few extra spaces on mine, not many, but there's a few.
Sometimes you can even triple up in those seats. I've seen it happen.
That's true. That's true. But I mean, it really is so important. It's so important to surround yourself with people that you feel safe with as the mom too. Like you can just let your guard down. And I mean, we're grateful that we have you guys, we have Tim's family, we have our lacrosse family. Those kids are the most inclusive group of kiddos I have ever seen. Like Declan gives them a high five and they act like, they just won the lottery. They're like, Declan, give me a high five, like he's like a mascot for them, but they all go up to him and say hi. Like they don't ever exclude him. And it's like, and the parents as well. I mean, that speaks obviously to their parents as well.
I feel like if you think too, like it's not so foreign to other, say, neurotypical kids when they're around a kid who's on the spectrum like that, like Declan, it becomes part of their normalcy. And, so, even you mentioned like going out to a restaurant, you kind of get like anxiety and think about, oh my God, what are people going to say if he like has a hard time? But if we flip it and kind of say, every time we go out somewhere, we're educating people, and maybe some people have more exposure than others. And maybe some people have no exposure to kids who are, not typical. And that's important to kind of think that every time Declan goes somewhere, out in public, he's teaching someone something, and maybe you get a poor reaction from someone, but then, you explain what's going on and maybe they won't ever do that again to somebody else, or maybe they'll go, oh, wow, like I really need to step up. Maybe they'll be an ignorant jerk forever, but like, you can't control that. All you can control is that, when you guys go out with Declan, it's not anyone else's, it's not, they have to deal. People have to be accepting. People have to learn to be more, less judgmental again, but like, it's an important thing that like, it stinks that you have to have that kind of anxiety to go out. I understand why you would, and I totally would too. But we need to live in a time now where we're just like, no, we're accepting of all. And like, if you don't, you look ignorant, not me. Like, that's kind of, I think, where we're at.
And I feel like that's why I always say, like, if we're out and someone, I always say he has nonverbal autism. It's not like, I just want you to know that. I want you to know that he might react a different way. I want you to be aware. And hopefully you show him a little bit of grace and me a little bit of grace, And it's funny, there's a pizza shop in New York where we go almost every day for lunch when we're there at Melillo's. And, the guy is so New York. I walk in every day with Declan, and I think by like our third day, he was like, hey, you guys live here? Like, I've never seen you before. And I told him, oh, we're treating, with this doctor down the street or whatever. And he goes, hold on. And he pulled up a receipt. He goes, I'm delivering him pizzas today. He's like, people come from all over the world to see him, right? He goes, I have a family that was here from Romania last week that they are sending the staff pizza. And I was like, yes, that's him. But fast forward, so we were so the rest finished out our week getting our pizza. And I said, oh, we'll see you, in September or whatever. We'll be back. Anyhow, I came back. Of course, Declan, I went to get our pizza. He goes, hey, Bobby. He goes, Mom, he looks great. He goes, I can see a difference. These people like Declan.
The guy is on the bus. I love it.
And I met his beautiful fiance and his baby. But all these people are part of Declan's story. And it's like, if I had just stayed shut down, I would have never had this actual beautiful interaction with a stranger.
Yeah.
Which then led to, I was looking forward to going back to get our pizza. And when I went back, he was like, Mom, I can see a difference.
That's so sweet.
So amazing. So it's like sharing is so important. Putting yourself out there is so important. It's sometimes really hard and really scary. And sometimes you don't get back what you're hoping to get back. I didn't think that guy would respond that way, but he did. It was so touching, and I won't ever forget that. And I won't, there's other people that just won't respond, to your point. They will stay ignorant for their entire lives. But the thought that Declan's story and Declan himself, this sweet little thing, is potentially changing people's perspectives is what a way to turn this into a gift.
Yeah.
What a way to turn a challenge into something that hopefully helps other people.
Yeah. Well, and that's a really small gesture that the pizza guy made to you, but something that's gonna absolutely just live with you forever. And he has no idea, probably. He was just making an off the cuff statement. And he felt it. Clearly it was very genuine, but I don't know. I just think that's so sweet that it doesn't take this monumental ask or this big support. Even when you support people, you want to support, doesn't mean you have to cross state boundaries and do all these things. There's lots of small ways to just be there for people. And that is a great example of one.
Yes, I know. I love the pizza guy.
Good New York pizza. My God, you've made a friend for
forever. And we'll see him in a couple of weeks when we're back there. I'm really looking forward to our pizza. But it's so sweet. He introduced me to his fiance. He's like, her son, and we started to talk about it. It's like, wow, what a gift. This guy who really was kind of surprised when I just said, oh, we're here, whatever. And I told him a little bit, and then it turned into this great thing. So,
well, and I think you need to tell him that when you see him, you should tell him, I know this, you made a comment last time we were here, and I just want you to know, it might have seemed like a small thing to you, but it will, you're forever one of the people who supports me. You're on my bus. Just here's a card. Here's your bus tag. It's like we give the little kindergartners on the first day,
Exactly. Well, this has been awesome. I'm so excited we did this together.
Me too. I can't wait to be back. Can I come back?
Yes, you will be back. Well, I feel like there's so much more to talk about too.
Oh, I feel like we've only scratched the surface. So
yes.
We didn't even get into our other biggest, Declan's other biggest supporters who aren't here to speak for themselves. So
I know. I want to talk about that on the next one. The next episode, Cathy and I lost our parents 4 months apart. Very surprisingly, very shockingly. In October of 2020, we lost our dad to a stroke, and then February 2021, we lost our mom to heart disease and heart failure. And that was all happening as I was navigating Declan's journey as well, and really starting to come to terms with that. But yeah, huge supporters, which we absolutely have to talk about that. But I think actually we'll talk about grief too, and kind of what that looks like, just because we've lived a few lives.
Yes.
Yeah, we've lived a few lives since 2020. I feel like a few iterations. So
a good way to put it. Yes.
And if nothing else, this is great for you and I.
Yeah, it's kind of fun. Exactly. If only every week could be a vacation week.
I know, exactly. All right. Well, thanks everybody for listening, and I appreciate it. And thanks for joining me, Kat.
Anytime, Di. Thanks for having me.